Dance with me. He'll see you're taken," the mafia boss whispered, and everyone stopped watching. The hum of Veritas was a low, expensive thrum that vibrated through the soles of Aria Flores's thin-soled work shoes. It was a sound she felt more than heard, a bass line of clinking crystal, muted laughter, and the subtle, dark cherry and old leather scent of money she would never have. She moved through the spaces between the patrons, a ghost in a black uniform, her tray held high and her expression meticulously blank. Invisibility was her armor. It was the only way to survive these nights, to collect the tips that were never quite enough, and to get home by 3 a.m. to check on Mateo. Mateo, her 16-year-old brother, her only family, was the reason she stood here, her feet aching and her mind calculating. His lungs were weak, a lingering shadow from a childhood illness that had blossomed into something frightening and expensive. The specialists, the medications, the whispered possibility of a new treatment, it all added up to a mountain of debt that Aria chipped away at, $100 tip at a time. Here, she was nobody. A hand to refill a glass of champagne, a shadow to clear a plate. The wealthy men and women who populated the plush, velvet booths of Veritas looked through her, their conversations about mergers and yachts and betrayals never pausing as she leaned between them. She was on autopilot, scanning the room for a raised hand or an empty glass. When the energy in the club shifted, it was not loud. It was the opposite. A pocket of silence opened near the entrance, a void that noise seemed to fall into. Dante Marcelli had arrived. Aria had never seen him up close, but every employee knew who he was. He was not just a patron, he was the owner. Not of Veritas, not officially, but of the building it was in, the block it sat on, and, according to the whispers in the locker room, the lives of half the people in the city. He was tall, dressed in a suit so dark it seemed to drink the low light, and he moved with a lethal, predatory grace that was all his own. He was not handsome in the way of the vapid, trust fund sons who threw their money on the tables. He was something else, dangerous. Controlled, his face looked carved from hard-bitten experience. His dark hair cut short, his eyes holding a stillness that was more intimidating than any overt threat. He did not go to the main floor. He was always taken to the elevated VIP booth in the back, the one with its own private bar and a view of the entire room. Aria watched from behind a marble pillar as he settled in, not with the usual entourage of loud, back-slapping men, but with 2 quiet, older gentlemen who looked more like bankers than bodyguards. Aria forced her attention back to her section. She had tables to clear, checks to run. She moved toward the edge of the VIP section, keeping her eyes down. Just another part of the background. That was when she saw it. It was booth 5. Just adjacent to Marcelli's private area, a man sat there alone, nursing a dark liquor. He was unremarkable, average, the kind of man you immediately forgot, but he was not looking at his drink. He was looking at Dante Marcelli. His focus was absolute. Aria paused, pretending to straighten a napkin on an empty table. Her skin prickled. Something was wrong. The man in booth 5 was waiting. He glanced at his watch, then back at Marcelli, a waiter, not from her section. One she vaguely recognized as new, approached Marcelli's booth carrying a single, short glass of amber liquid on a small silver tray. Marcelli's preferred drink, a rare scotch. Served neat. The waiter set it down. As the waiter turned, the man in booth 5 stood, as if to use the restroom. He intercepted the waiter, a hand on his arm. A supposedly friendly word. The waiter, flustered, smiled. The man from booth 5 gestured, laughed, and in that split second of distraction his other hand moved over the waiter's tray. Hovering above the glass meant for Marcelli. Aria saw it. A glint of metal, a small, dark ring on his pinky finger. He twisted it and a fine, almost invisible white powder sifted from a hidden compartment, dusting the surface of the scotch. It took 2 seconds. Maybe less. The man clapped the waiter on the back and moved on. The waiter, oblivious, continued his path to Dante Marcelli's table. Aria's blood went cold. Her heart hammered against her ribs. A frantic bird in a tiny cage. "It's not my business. Walk away. Forget it. You'll be fired. You'll be worse than fired. They will throw you out, and Matteo will not get his medicine." The waiter was 10 feet from Marcelli. "He's a killer." A voice in her head whispered, "He's a bad man. Let them kill each other." But her eyes flickered to Marcelli. He was listening to one of the older men. His head slightly tilted, he looked calm. He did not deserve to be poisoned like an animal. No one did. Aria's body moved before her mind could stop it. She snatched a clean cocktail napkin from her apron, fumbling for the pen she kept tucked in her waistband. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely form the letters. She kept it short, her handwriting jagged with panic. "Don't drink. He's watching. Booth 5. No backup tonight." She had seen him arrive. He usually had 4, sometimes 6 men. Tonight, there were none visible. Just the 2 old men. It was a detail she had not even realized she had logged. The waiter set the glass down in front of Dante. Aria did not think. She just moved. Holding her empty tray against her hip, she walked straight toward the VIP booth, her path taking her directly past Marcelli's table. She did not slow, did not look at him, in one smooth, practiced motion, the kind she used to clear a dozen glasses a night. She let her hand sweep over the dark wood of the table, her fingers brushing the napkin forward until it sat directly beside the poisoned glass. She did not break stride. She kept walking, her back rigid, every nerve ending screaming. She expected a hand on her shoulder, a rough voice. Nothing. She made it 10 feet away before she dared to glance back. Dante Marcelli had not moved, but his eyes, dark and sharp as obsidian chips, were on her. He had seen her. He saw her. Then, his gaze dropped to the napkin. He did not open it immediately. He continued his conversation, picked up the glass, swirled the liquid, and held it to the light, as if admiring its color. Then, with an air of casual disinterest, he tapped the napkin, unfolding it with one finger. Aria watched him read it. His expression did not change. There was no alarm, no surprise, just a deepening of the stillness that surrounded him. He read it once, twice, then, very slowly, his eyes lifted and met hers again across the expanse of the club. Aria's breath caught. He held her gaze, and in that single, terrifying, silent moment, he gave an almost imperceptible nod. It was not a thank you. It was an acknowledgement, a transaction. He set the glass down, untouched. He leaned back in his chair, his body language relaxed, but his eyes were now on booth 5. He picked up his phone, typed a single, short message, and put it away. He said something to the 2 men with him, who both nodded, their faces grim. Aria turned and fled, ducking into the relative safety of the service corridor, her back pressed against the cool wall, her entire body trembling. She had done it. She had interfered. She had stepped out of the shadows, and Dante Marcelli had seen her. The next 10 minutes were the longest of her life. She tried to work, but her hands shook so badly she almost dropped a tray of glasses. She kept glancing at the VIP section. The removal was so quiet. She almost missed it. The man from booth 5 stood up. Perhaps sensing the trap was blown, he headed for the side exit, the one that led to the alley. He never made it. 2 of the club's bouncers, men who worked for Marcelli and not the club, stepped into his path. They were not aggressive. They simply flanked him. One of them said something, his face amiable. The man from booth 5 tensed, his hand moving toward his jacket. Before he could reach it, one bouncer had his arm, the other had his other arm, and they were walking him, not toward the exit, but toward the back of the house kitchen. It was fast, clean, and utterly silent. No one on the club floor even noticed. The man was just gone. Aria let out a breath she did not know she was holding, the relief so sharp it made her dizzy. It was over. He was safe. She was safe. She was wrong. 20 minutes later, as she was stacking glasses, one of Marcelli's lieutenants, a mountain of a man named Rocco, whose broken nose told its own story, appeared at her elbow. "Aria Flores?" he rumbled. She jumped, her heart leaping into her throat. "Yes, mister." Marcelli wants to see you. Upstairs. Now." The blood drained from her face. This was it. She was going to be fired, or questioned, or worse. "Now I'm in the middle of my shift." Rocco's expression did not soften. He just looked at her. It was not a request. "This way." He led her past the velvet ropes, past the other waitresses who stared at her with a mixture of fear and curiosity, and up the private, carpeted staircase that led to the management offices. The sound of the club faded, replaced by an oppressive, thick silence. Rocco stopped at a heavy oak door and knocked once. "She's here, boss." A voice from inside, low and smooth, replied, "Send her in. You wait outside." Rocco opened the door and gestured for her to enter. Aria's legs felt like lead. She stepped inside, and the door clicked shut behind her, the sound as final as a cell door locking. The office was huge, dark, and dominated by a floor-to-ceiling window that offered a panoramic view of the city's glittering skyline. Dante Marcelli stood in front of it, a silhouette against the lights. He was not looking at the view. He was looking at her. The room was silent, save for the faint, distant sound of city sirens. He did not speak, just watched her, his assessment so intense it felt physical. Aria stood just inside the door, her hands twisting the hem of her apron. She was shaking again, but this time, it was not just fear. It was a primal, animal terror. Finally, he spoke. His voice was exactly as it had sounded from the other side of the door, calm, deep, and carrying an authority that required no volume. "You saw everything." It was not a question. Aria swallowed, her throat dry. I was at the service station. I saw—" "You saw a man attempt to poison me," he finished for her, his voice flat. He turned from the window and walked toward the massive mahogany desk, but he did not sit. He perched on the edge, closer to her, his arms crossed over his chest. The light from the desk lamp caught the planes of his face, highlighting the harsh line of his jaw. "Now I need to know why." "Why?" she whispered, confused. "Why you warned me. You work here. You serve drinks. You are, for all intents and purposes, invisible. It was not your business. You risked your job, and possibly more, to slip me that note. Why?" Aria looked down at her battered shoes. He was right. It was stupid, reckless. She should have let it happen. But she could not. I don't know," she stammered. I saw him. He was watching you. I knew you didn't have your usual security." She flushed, realizing how that sounded. His eyes narrowed, just slightly. "You noticed that?" "I notice things," she said, her voice barely audible. "It's part of the job. You were a target, and no one else saw. I couldn't just watch him." "Do that? Do you know who I am? Aria?" She nodded, her gaze still on the floor. "Everyone knows who you are, Mr. Marcelli. And you are aware," he continued, his voice dropping, "that the man in booth 5 was not the only person in this room tonight who has killed—" Aria's head snapped up, her eyes wide with fear. I didn't think—" "No, you did not. You acted. That is unusual." He studied her, his head tilted. "You are not one of mine. You are not on my payroll. You owe me nothing. So I ask again, why?" The silence stretched. Aria knew, with a sudden, cold certainty, that lying was not an option. This man would see through it in a second. The truth, it was all she had. "My brother," she said, the words coming out in a rush. "My brother, Matteo. He's sick. His lungs. He needs medication. He might need a transplant one day. The bills, they are a lot." Dante's expression remained unreadable. "And what does your brother's health have to do with me?" "Because I know what it's like," she said, her voice trembling but gaining a strange, desperate strength. "To be helpless. To watch something bad happen and not be able to stop it. I spent 6 years in foster care. Mr. Marcelli, I learned to see things other people don't. I learned to be invisible, to watch. And I couldn't let him do it. It was wrong," she finished, breathless, her heart pounding. She had said too much. She had told this cold, dangerous man about Matteo, about her past. She had made herself vulnerable. Dante was silent for a long time. He pushed off the desk and walked to the window, staring out at the city. Arya waited, her fate hanging in the balance. "You're in a difficult position, Arya," he said finally, his back still to her. "You saw what you saw. You involved yourself. The man from Booth 5 has been dealt with. But he was not working alone. His associates will know the attempt failed. They will wonder why. They will look for the variable. The variable, Arya, is you." He turned. "You are no longer neutral. You are no longer invisible." A cold dread, deeper than anything she had felt before, settled over her. What does that mean?" "It means you have a choice," he said. He walked back to his desk, took a pen, and scribbled something on a piece of paper. He slid it across the polished wood. It was a check. The amount on it made her stomach clench. It was more money than she had ever seen. Choice 1. You take this. You pack a bag tonight. You and your brother. You get on a plane and you go somewhere far away. You start over. You never come back. You forget you ever worked here. You forget my name." Arya stared at the check. It was a lifeline. It was escape. It was everything she needed for Mateo. "And choice 2? She whispered. Dante's eyes locked on hers. "Choice 2. You stay. You tear up that check. You go home. But you are no longer just a waitress. You are under my protection, which means you belong to me. You will do what I say. You will go where I say, and you will report anything and everything you see. You will no longer be invisible. You will be mine to watch." The air left her lungs. A cage. He was offering her a cage. I can't leave," she said, the words tearing out of her. "Mateo, his doctors are here. His treatment. He's stable. I can't just pull him out of his life. I can't run." She was crying now. Silent tears of rage and fear tracking down her cheeks. She was so tired of running. Foster care had been running. This job was running. She was done. "I won't run," she said, louder this time, her voice hard. She met his gaze, unflinching. Dante studied her, a strange, unreadable emotion flickering in his dark eyes. It was not pity. It was something else. Respect. He slowly reached across the desk, picked up the check, and tore it in half, then in quarters, letting the pieces fall into the wastebasket. "Very well," he said. "You made your choice." He pressed a button on his intercom. "Rocco, send Marco to the front. My car, I want him to take Miss Flores home." You're letting me go?" Arya asked, stunned. "For tonight," Dante said. "You are done with your shift. Go home. Be with your brother." "But my job..." "You will be here tomorrow, 5 o'clock, as usual." He turned back to the window. A clear dismissal. "Marco will see you home safely." Arya, numb and confused, backed out of the room. Rocco was waiting, his face impassive. He led her back down the stairs, not through the club, but through a private elevator that deposited them in the building's lobby. A sleek, black town car was idling at the curb. The driver, Marco, opened the back door for her. The ride to her rundown apartment building was silent. Arya felt like she was in a dream. When they pulled up, she fumbled for the door handle. "Thank you," she mumbled. "Wait," Marco said. He got out, scanned the street, and opened her door. Arya stepped out onto the cracked pavement and looked around, and she saw them. Across the street, leaning against a graffiti-covered wall, were 2 men. They were in dark suits that looked out of place in her neighborhood. They were not looking at her, but she knew, with a sudden, chilling certainty. They were there for her. Her protection. Her cage. She hurried inside, her keys shaking in her hand, and locked the 3 deadbolts on her door. "Arya, that you?" Mateo was on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, a video game controller in his lap. He looked pale, but his eyes were bright. "Hey, Maddie, you should be asleep." "I saw you pull up," he said, a grin playing on his lips. "In a limo. Seriously, Arya, you finally got a rich boyfriend or something?" Arya forced a laugh, her heart aching. "Something like that. Kid, go to bed." She went into her tiny bedroom and sat on the edge of her mattress, the sounds of Mateo's game filtering through the thin wall. She did not sleep. The next evening, When she arrived at Veritas, everything was different. The security guard at the employee entrance, who usually just grunted at her, nodded respectfully. "Evening, Miss Flores." Her manager, a man who regularly snapped at her for being 2 minutes late, greeted her with a nervous smile. "Aria, good to have you. Your usual section is ready." As she stepped onto the club floor, the whispers started. The other waitresses avoided her eyes. The bartenders, who usually ignored her, suddenly made sure her orders were filled first. She was no longer a ghost. Word had spread, carried on the invisible currents of power that ran the city. Aria Flores, the invisible waitress, was no longer invisible. Dante Marcelli owed her a debt, and in his world, a debt was a chain. She just did not know who was holding the other end. The new awareness was a physical weight, a spotlight that followed Aria Flores from the moment she clocked in. Her invisibility, the armor she had cultivated for years, had been stripped away, leaving her nerves raw and exposed. In the locker room, conversations no longer paused and then resumed. They stopped completely, dropping into a sudden, heavy silence the moment she pushed open the door. The other waitresses, women she had shared complaints and cigarettes with, now offered tight, nervous smiles and found reasons to be elsewhere. Her section was always immaculate, her ice bucket always full, her tables mysteriously bussed by other staff before she could get to them. She was no longer one of them. She was a problem, or a pet. The patrons were worse. The men who had once looked through her now stared, their eyes heavy with speculation and a gross, assessing hunger, followed her as she moved. They saw the 2 men who now flanked the entrance of Veritas, men who did not wear the club's uniform but answered to Dante Marcelli. They saw the way the floor manager, a man who once terrorized her, now practically bowed when he asked her to cover a table. One night, a regular, a hedge fund manager with a face flushed from expensive wine, grabbed her wrist as she passed. "Hey," he slurred, his thumb pressing into her pulse. "I want to buy you a drink. I want to buy Marcelli's new pet a drink." Aria froze, her blood turning to ice, but before she could even form a protest, Rocco was there. He appeared from the shadows like a force of nature, his massive hand closing over the client's shoulder. The sound of bones grinding together was sickening, but the client's gasp was swallowed by the club's music. "She's working, Mr. Davies." Rocco's voice was a low rumble. "And she is not on the menu." He released the man, who cradled his shoulder, his face pale and suddenly sober. He just nodded, his eyes wide with fear, and Rocco melted back into the shadows. Aria stood there, trembling, the center of a silent 5-foot circle of open space. She was protected. She had never felt less safe. The breaking point came a week later. It arrived not as a threat, but as a blessing, which was somehow worse. She was sitting at her small kitchen table before her shift, sorting through the mountain of mail. Most of it was junk, but her stomach always clenched when she saw the stark, white envelopes from the Pediatric Pulmonary Center. She had 2 of them. She opened the first, a final notice for a medication copayment. She set it on the pay immediately pile, which was really just the pray for a good tip pile. She opened the second. It was not a bill. It was a statement, a summary of all outstanding charges for Mateo's care, specialist visits, advanced imaging, the new inhaler technology, the total, a number that haunted her sleep, was listed at the bottom, and next to it, stamped in red, was a single line, account paid in full. Aria stared at it. It was impossible. The balance was over $30,000. She thought it was a mistake, a cruel clerical error. But then, below the stamp, she saw a note, payment rendered by anonymous donor via the Marcelli Family Foundation. The breath left her body in a hot, angry rush. It was not relief she felt. It was violation. It was a cold, calculated transaction. He had not just paid her debt, he had bought it. He had bought her. She did not call. She did not wait for her shift. She grabbed the statement, shoved her feet into her shoes, and took the bus to Veritas. It was 4 p.m, the club empty, smelling of stale champagne and industrial cleaner. The guards at the front, surprised to see her, tried to stop her, Mister, Marcelli is not in, one said. He is, she snapped, her voice shaking with a fury she did not know she possessed. And he'll see me. She pushed past them, ignoring their calls, and stormed through the empty club to the private elevator. She rode it up to the office, her heart hammering not with fear, but with a righteous, terrifying rage. She did not knock. She threw the door open. Dante was at his desk, on the phone, a column of afternoon sunlight catching the smoke from a cigarette in an ashtray. He looked up, his eyes narrowing, but he showed no surprise. He simply held up a finger, said, "I will call you back," and hung up. "You should have knocked," he said, his voice calm. "What is this?" She threw the paper on his desk. It landed next to his hand. He did not look at it. "It appears to be a statement of account. Aria." "It's paid," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It says paid in full. By you." "By an anonymous donor," he corrected her, his voice a silken, infuriating purr. "Do not lie to me. Not about this." He leaned back, steepling his fingers. "It was a problem. I solved it. Your brother will get the care he needs. You are no longer under the stress of his debt. You should be thanking me." "Thanking you?" she exploded. "You had no right. That was my responsibility. It was mine. You don't get to just buy my life. You think because you paid a bill you own me?" "I own your safety," he said. And the calm in his voice was suddenly gone, replaced by a cold, hard edge that made her take a step back. "I own the fact that you are still breathing. Do you have any idea what you stepped into?" He stood, his movement fluid and dangerous. "You are not a waitress. Aria, not anymore. You are the girl who saved my life. You are the girl who was seen saving my life. And the man who failed to kill me? He worked for Nico Verratti?" Aria's anger faltered, a flicker of cold fear running down her spine. "Who?" "A rival. A man who believes in volume, not quality. He's loud, he's impulsive, and he's greedy. He was at the club that night. He saw you. He saw me receive your warning, and when his man disappeared, he knew why." Dante walked around the desk, stopping a few feet from her. He was close enough that she could smell the faint scent of expensive cologne and tobacco. "In my world, a man like Nico does not see failure. He sees opportunity, and right now, he sees you. He sees you as one of two things. You are either leverage to be used against me, or you are a prize to be taken from me." He tapped the statement on his desk. "So, yes, I paid the bill. I cleared the board. I will not have you compromised. I will not have Nico Verratti or anyone else find a single string to pull. Your brother is safe. His doctors are secure. That is not a cage. Aria, it is a fortress." She stood there, her anger evaporating, leaving her cold and shaken. He was right. She had been furious about the cage, not realizing it was built to keep the wolves out. "So what now?" she whispered. "Am I your prisoner? Do I just stay in my apartment until this Nico goes away?" "He will not go away, and you are not a prisoner." He paused, studying her face. "But you are a problem, a public one. We need a public solution." Aria's stubbornness, her last flickering ember of pride, resurfaced. "I'm still working. I will not hide. I need my job. I need to be normal." A ghost of a smile, so faint it was barely there, touched his lips. "You will never be normal again, Aria, but I respect your stubbornness. It is, perhaps, your most defining quality." He went to the window, looking down at the city. "Fine. You can keep your job on one condition." "What condition?" "This Friday, my family hosts a gathering. It is not a party. It is a meeting of associates, allies, and rivals. Everyone who matters will be there, including Nico Verratti." "You want me to go?" "I want you to be seen," he corrected. "You will be my guest, and at some point during the evening, you will dance with me." Aria stared at him. "A dance? How's that a condition?" "You still do not understand the world you are in," he said, turning to face her. "In this world, we do not sign contracts. We send messages, a gift, a threat, a public display. A man like Nico Verratti understands only one thing: power. He thinks you are a weakness he can exploit. I must show him, and everyone else in that room, that you are not a weakness. You are mine, and what is mine is not to be touched. The night of the gala. A long, heavy box arrived at her apartment. Inside, nestled in black tissue paper, was a dress. It was not a color, it was a shadow. A deep, forest green silk that felt like water in her hands. It was simple, elegant, and worth more than everything she owned. There was no note. None was needed. The ballroom was in one of the city's oldest, most prestigious hotels, a space that dripped with old-world wealth. The ceilings were covered in gold leaf, and chandeliers like frozen waterfalls cast a glittering, cold light over the assembly. The room was filled with men in dark, impeccable suits and women who looked like beautiful, dangerous birds, armored in diamonds and silk. The air was thick with the scent of perfume and power, and the low hum of conversation was undercut by a tension so sharp Arya felt it on her skin. Dante was at her side, his hand not touching her, but hovering a fraction of an inch from the small of her back. He was a different man here. In the club, he was the boss. Here, he was a king. Men, older and harder looking than him, nodded as he passed. Women's eyes followed him, cold and calculating. He moved through the crowd with an effortless grace, his face a mask of cold, polite charisma. Arya felt like a fraud. Her hands were clammy, her steps unsteady. The silk of the dress felt too light, too exposing. Every eye that passed over her felt like a physical touch. "They're all looking at us," she murmured, keeping her eyes fixed on a point just past his shoulder. "Good," he replied, his voice low. "That is the point." He guided her toward the edge of the dance floor, where a string quartet was playing something slow and melancholic. Across the room, she saw him. Nico Verratti. He was younger than Dante, flashier, with a cruel, handsome face and a smile that never reached his cold, blue eyes. He was watching her, his gaze an unclean thing, and he raised his glass in a mock toast. Dante saw it. His body went rigid for a fraction of a second. "Now," he said. "What? Now. The music is right." He turned and held out his hand. Arya looked at his outstretched hand, then at the sea of faces watching them. Here? In front of everyone? Especially in front of everyone. She took his hand. His skin was warm, his grip firm. He led her to the center of the polished marble floor. The space cleared around them, a perfect, silent circle. The whispers were a physical wave, washing over her. "Dante, I can't," she whispered, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. "They're all staring. What if they think I belong to you?" He stopped in the center of the floor. He did not release her hand. Instead, he used it to pull her closer, his other hand moving not to her waist, but to the small of her back, his fingers splaying wide and firm at the base of her spine. The touch was electric, a brand. He leaned in, his lips brushing the shell of her ear, his breath hot and sudden against her skin. "Dance with me. He'll see you're taken." And just like that, every whisper stopped. The sound in the ballroom did not just quiet, it was sucked into a void. The king had made his move, and the court was silent, watching. Arya's breath caught in her throat. She had no choice. She placed her trembling hand on his shoulder. He pulled her flush against him, and the world dissolved. There was only the music, the warmth of his hand, and the unyielding pressure of his body. He moved, and she moved with him. He was a perfect leader, his steps sure and controlled. She felt the coiled tension in his muscles, the hard planes of his chest through the thin silk of her dress. It was not a romantic dance. It was a claiming. It was a statement, made of slow, magnetic steps and unbroken eye contact. He looked at her, and only her. His dark eyes were unblinking, intense, a silent conversation she did not understand but felt in her very bones. The air crackled around them, thick with an intimacy that was more dangerous than any threat. She could feel the subtle shift of his muscles, the restraint in his every move, the power he held in check just by breathing. He held her as if she were made of glass, yet his grip was an iron promise. He would not let her go. The music swelled, and Arya forgot to breathe. She was no longer a waitress from the Bronx. She was his, in this room, in this moment. She was his. When the song ended, the silence stretched for a beat before the room remembered to breathe. Polite, sharp applause broke the spell. Dante did not release her, not immediately. He kept his hand on her back, his eyes still locked on hers, as if sealing the promise. Then he guided her off the floor. As they reached the edge, Nico Verratti stepped directly into their path. "Dante," Nico said, his voice oily, his eyes sliding over Arya like a slug. "A lovely performance. You never said you were sharing your new toys." Arya flinched, a small, involuntary movement. Dante did not reach for a weapon. He did not raise his voice. He simply moved, stepping in front of Arya, physically shielding her from Nico's gaze. He was a half-inch shorter than the other man, but he seemed to loom. "She's not yours to look at." The words were spoken quietly, almost conversationally, but they hit with the force of a gunshot. The air went frigid. Nico's smile froze, the color draining from his face. He held Dante's gaze for a long, taut second, and then he was the first to break. He let out a short, forced laugh. "No offense intended, Marcelli. Just admiring your taste." "Do not," Dante said, his voice flat. "Make that mistake again." Nico nodded, his fake smile gone, and he melted back into the crowd. Dante's hand found her back again, the pressure urgent. "We're leaving." The car ride home was silent, the air in the back of the town car thick with unspoken things. Marco walked her to the lobby, where her two guards nodded. She took the stairs, her legs still feeling unsteady. She locked the 3 bolts on her apartment door and leaned against it, her body finally, fully trembling. She shed the dress, letting the green silk pool on her floor like a discarded skin. She lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, the city lights painting faint, moving shadows on the wall. She could not sleep. She replayed the entire night, but her mind kept snagging on one moment, the dance. She touched the small of her back, right at the base of her spine. The skin tingled, as if his hand were still there. It had not been a caress. It had been a brand. She had gone to that party a nobody, a ghost. She had left as something else. The whispers had been true. The boss's girl. It was not an insult. It was a title, one he had bestowed on her in front of the entire underworld. And as she lay there, she could still feel the impossible, magnetic pull, the way he had looked at her. It was not love. It was something far more dangerous. It was possession. It was a look that said he wanted, not just to protect her, but to keep her. The dance had changed nothing, and it had changed everything. Arya's life was now a split screen. On one side, she was the same woman, catching the bus, reminding Matteo to take his inhaler, and meticulously wiping down tables at Veritas. On the other side, she was a symbol, a piece of property in a game she did not understand, her nights punctuated by the silent, watchful presence of her bodyguards. The whispers had not stopped. They had simply changed their tone, from speculative to certain. Dante had not spoken to her since the gala. He'd been in the club, a dark, brooding presence in his usual booth, but he had not summoned her. He just watched. His gaze a physical weight she felt on her back as she served drinks. This new silence was louder than his commands, a question mark hanging in the air that left her constantly on edge. Then, 3 nights after the gala, just as she was hanging up her apron, Rocco appeared at the locker room door. "He's waiting for you. Miss Flores. In the car." Her heart, which had just begun to settle, gave a familiar, violent lurch. "Waiting for me? I'm done. I was going home." "He knows," Rocco said, his face impassive. "He said to tell you he needs to show you something." Arya's protest died on her lips. It was not a request. She said a quick, silent goodbye to the idea of her lumpy mattress and followed Rocco's broad back out to the curb. The sleek black town car was there, engine idling. Marco was not at the wheel. Dante was in the driver's seat, the engine a low, powerful thrum beneath them. The divider was down. He did not look at her as she slid into the passenger seat, the leather cool against her skin. He simply put the car in gear and pulled away from the curb. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice small in the opulent silence of the car. "You ask too many questions," he said, but there was no bite in his voice. "Just watch the city." He drove, not toward her apartment, but downtown, toward the glittering steel and glass heart of the financial district. The streets were empty, the hour too late for workers, too early for the morning rush. He navigated the concrete canyons with an easy, confident familiarity, one hand on the wheel. He parked not in a garage, but in a private, unmarked alley behind a towering skyscraper. He cut the engine. The silence was absolute. "Come on," he said, getting out. He led her through a steel door, into a silent, marble-floored service lobby. He had a key, a heavy, old-fashioned brass key, which he used to call a private elevator. The elevator was lined in dark, polished wood, and rose with a silent, stomach-dropping speed. "This building, it's one of yours, isn't it?" she asked. He glanced at her, his profile sharp in the dim light. "Everything is, in a way." The elevator doors opened not into a hallway, but directly onto a wind-swept rooftop. Arya gasped. The city was spread out beneath them, a breathtaking, infinite ocean of light. They were so high that the sirens and traffic were a distant, muted roar. The wind was alive up here, cold and sharp, and it immediately whipped her hair across her face and pulled at her thin work clothes. "This is where you see it from," Dante said, walking to the edge. He stood by a low, stone parapet, a king surveying his kingdom. Arya walked to stand beside him. Though she kept a few feet of distance, the view was terrifying, and it was beautiful. It made her feel impossibly small. "See what?" "The board," he said. "The whole thing, down there." He gestured to the streets below. "You only see the next corner, the man in front of you, the thread at your back. Up here, you see the patterns. You see how it all connects." He was not just showing her a view. He was showing her how he thought. "Why did you bring me here, Dante?" He turned his head, his dark eyes searching her face. "You've been patient. You did not run, even when you should have. You have not broken. Is that what I am to you? An experiment?" "No," he said, the word sharper than he intended. He turned back to the city. "You remind me of someone. My sister, Ilara. She died when she was 16, same age as your brother." Arya's breath caught. She'd been expecting a threat, a command, another lesson in his power. Not this, not a crack in the armor. "She was like you," he went on, his voice low, the wind snatching at his words. "She saw things. She was not afraid of the dark, just of what was in it, but she was stubborn. She thought she was invincible." He paused, and a shadow passed over his face. A flicker of pain so deep it was almost physical. She got sick. An infection after a simple surgery. The doctors, they were useless. All my father's money, all his power, and we just had to watch her fade. I learned that day that there are two kinds of monsters. The ones you can shoot, and the ones you can't. He turned to her, his gaze intense. "I do not let civilians into my world, Arya, ever. It is a promise I made at her grave. They are not built for it. They are the things we are supposed to be protecting. The one thing we have to get right. And me?" she whispered, the wind pulling a strand of hair across her lips. "What am I?" "You are the exception I never wanted," he said. A low rumble echoed through the air, vibrating in her chest. A jagged line of light split the sky in the distance, followed seconds later by a louder crack of thunder. The wind, which had been steady, suddenly turned violent, a gust of cold, wet air sweeping across the rooftop. A fat drop of rain hit Arya's cheek, then another. "The storm," he said, looking up. "It's here early." As if on cue, the sky opened. The rain was not a drizzle. It was a deluge, instant and icy. Dante grabbed her hand. "This way." He pulled her toward a small, covered structure in the center of the roof, a sort of cabana with thick canvas awnings. They ducked under the canopy just as the rain turned to a deafening roar on the canvas above them. They were in a small, dry bubble. the city lights now blurred and fragmented by the sheets of water. The air was heavy with the smell of ozone and wet pavement. Arya was breathing hard, partly from the sudden dash, partly from his confession. She was soaked, her thin uniform clinging to her skin. She wrapped her arms around herself, but she began to shiver, a deep, uncontrollable tremor. "You're cold," he stated, his voice a low rumble beneath the drumming of the rain. "I'm fine." She lied. He stepped closer. He was in her space now, the small enclosure making him seem larger, the darkness under the canopy hiding his expression. "You are a terrible liar." He did not offer his jacket. Instead, he raised his hands and, with a slow, deliberate motion, began to rub her arms, his palms rough and warm, chafing her skin through the wet cotton. The friction sent sparks of heat all the way to her core. "Dante," she breathed, her voice shaky. "You're shivering," he said, his voice husky, but his hands did not stop. They moved up her arms to her shoulders, his thumbs drawing small circles. She looked up at him. His face was inches from hers, his eyes dark and unreadable. He was not just warming her, he was touching her, and he was not stopping. The shiver that ran through her this time had nothing to do with the cold. His hand lifted from her shoulder. He moved slowly, as if giving her time to pull away. His calloused fingers, the hands of a man who was more than a boss, brushed the wet strands of hair from her cheek, his thumb grazing the line of her jaw. He tucked the hair behind her ear, and his hand lingered, cupping the side of her face, their eyes locked, the world outside, the rain, the city. It all disappeared. There was only the sound of their breathing, the roar of the storm, and the intense, burning question in his gaze. "You shouldn't look at me like that," she whispered, her voice trembling, a muscle in his jaw feathered. His gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. "Then stop looking back." He gave her no more warning. He leaned in, and his mouth was on hers. It was not a gentle kiss. It was not a rough one. It was a kiss of pure, undiluted tension. It was the release of every unspoken word since the night she passed him the napkin. His lips were firm, warm, and tasted faintly of whiskey and the storm. He did not push, did not demand. He simply took, claiming her mouth with the same quiet, absolute authority with which he claimed everything else. Arya's hands, which had been trapped between them, came up to rest on his chest. The fabric of his suit was damp, his heartbeat a steady, heavy thud beneath her palms. She did not kiss him back, not at first. She was frozen, overwhelmed. He seemed to sense it. He softened the kiss, his lips moving against hers in a slow, persuasive exploration. And his hands. His hands were so gentle. His other hand came up, cradling her face, holding her as if she were made of porcelain, as if she were something precious he was terrified he might break. That gentleness, so at odds with the man who had burned with cold fury at the gala, was her undoing. A small, broken sound escaped her throat. She leaned into his touch, and her lips parted. He took that as the invitation it was. The kiss deepened, and a bolt of pure, white-hot heat shot through her, erasing the cold, the fear, the rain. It was not about power, not about protection. It was about this connection. She pulled back first, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She was breathless, panicked by the enormity of what had just happened. This was not a dance. This was not a statement for Nico Verratti. This was real, and it was dangerous. I can't, she panted, pushing lightly against his chest. Dante let her go, instantly. He did not try to pull her back. He did not argue. He just stepped back, his hands dropping to his sides. His expression was unreadable in the dim light, his chest rising and falling. The air between them was thick, charged, and crackling with the consequences of their actions. The rain began to slow, the thunder moving off into the distance. "I should take you home," he said, his voice gravelly. The next day, Arya walked through her shift in a daze. Every time she closed her eyes, she was back on the rooftop, the taste of him on her lips, the feel of his hands on her face. She was jumpy, her nerves frayed. She dropped a glass, something she had not done in years, and the sound of it shattering made her cry out. Her manager, seeing her pale face and trembling hands, sent her home an hour early. She usually took the bus, but tonight, the thought of being in a crowded, enclosed space was too much. She decided to walk the 20 blocks, hoping the cold night air would clear her head, her guards, 2 new faces, followed in a black sedan, keeping a respectful distance. She was 10 blocks from her apartment, passing a dark, narrow side street used as a service entrance for a row of restaurants, when a car, a battered blue sedan, screeched around the corner, cutting her off on the sidewalk. At the same time, 2 men stepped out of a darkened doorway, blocking her path. Her guard's car was stuck a block back in traffic. Aria froze, her blood turning to ice water. These were not Dante's men. They were dressed in cheap, flashy clothes, their faces hard and cruel. "Aria Flores," one of them said, smiling a smile that showed too many teeth. He had a faint, cruel scar on his lip. "We were hoping you'd take a walk. Nico sends his regards." "Leave me alone," Aria said, her voice shaking, her hand fumbling in her pocket for her phone. Ah, the other man said, stepping forward and snatching the phone from her hand. He tossed it to the ground, where it shattered. "We're not going to hurt you. Not tonight." "We're just here to deliver a message," Scarlip said, stepping so close she could smell the sour liquor on his breath. He did not touch her. He just invaded her space, his eyes crawling over her. "Nico, he doesn't like it when other people play with his toys, and he thinks you're his toy." "I'm not his," Aria spat, her fear giving way to a sudden, cold anger. The man laughed. "You're not his. You're not Marcelli's. You're just in the middle. And that's a bad place to be." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "He wants you to know you don't belong to him yet." The implication hung in the air, thick and vile. "But you will," the second man added, his eyes dead. A horn blared. The black sedan had broken free of traffic and was barreling down the street, its high beams flashing. "Show's over," Scarlip said. He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging in like talons, and shoved her hard against the brick wall. Her head cracked against the mortar, and she cried out, spots of light dancing in her vision. Before she could even slide to the ground, Dante's men were out of the car, their own weapons drawn. But the other men were already gone, vanishing into the back of their sedan, which tore off down the alley. Her guards, their faces pale with rage and fear, rushed to her. "Miss Flores? Are you hurt?" "I'm fine," she lied, her voice raspy, her hand going to the back of her head. She was shaking so violently she could barely stand. They did not take her home. They took her straight to Veritas, straight up the private elevator. Dante was in his office, meeting with Rocco. He looked up as they burst in. Aria supported between the 2 guards, his face, which had been in relaxed conversation, turned to stone. "What happened?" His voice was ice. "Nico's men," one of the guards said, his voice tight. "They cornered her. We were stuck in traffic. It was 2 minutes. We failed, boss." Dante's eyes moved to Aria, to her pale face, her trembling hands, the red mark on her cheek where she had hit the wall. He said nothing. He just walked to her, his gaze sweeping over her, checking for damage. "What did they say?" he asked, his voice terrifyingly quiet. Aria, her vision still blurry, looked up at him. She told him, she repeated their words, every last filthy syllable. They said, "You don't belong to him yet." The room went so cold, Aria thought she might start shivering again. Dante's face was no longer a mask. It was a void. He was not angry. He was not furious. He was something else. Something final. He turned to Rocco. "Find them. Boss, find them. Find out where they sleep. Find out where they drink. And find me Nico's primary warehouse. The one on the waterfront he's so proud of." "Dante," Rocco said, his eyes wide. That's a declaration of war?" "He put his hands on her," Dante whispered. The words so low, Aria almost missed them. "He put his hands on her. Burn it to the ground." That night, the news was full of it. A mysterious 5-alarm fire had erupted on the city's waterfront, engulfing a warehouse owned by a Verratti family holding company. Fire officials suspected arson, citing an accelerant and signs of a professional, targeted attack. Aria watched the report on the small television in her apartment. Dante had sent her home. His final words to her, a simple, "Lock your door." She was falling. She realized, her hand pressed to her lips. She was falling, not for the boss who owned the club, not for the king who commanded ballrooms, but for the man who spoke of his dead sister with a raw, broken grief, the man who had kissed her in the rain as if she were his only anchor, the man who had just set a city block on fire because someone had dared to touch her. Dante came to her apartment late the next night. He did not knock. He used a key she did not know he had. She was on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, and she started when he came in. He looked exhausted. His tie was off, his collar unbuttoned. He sat on the coffee table opposite her, his hands clasped between his knees. His knuckles were raw, the skin split, as if he had been punching a brick wall. Aria looked at his hands, then at his face. She reached out, her fingers trembling, and lightly, so lightly, traced the line of his scarred knuckles. He flinched, but he did not pull away. "I've hurt people," he said, his voice quiet and rough. "I've done things, Aria, things that would make your blood run cold." His dark eyes met hers, filled with a self-loathing that pierced her heart. "But never you. I would never hurt you." "I know," she whispered. The air between them was thick again, but the panic was gone. This time, there was only a deep, aching need. She leaned forward and he met her halfway. The kiss was not slow. It was not gentle. It was desperate. It was needy. It was a collision of two people who had seen the darkness and were reaching for the only light they could find. His hands were in her hair, his mouth hungry on hers. Her hands were on his face, her fingers gripping his jaw as if to hold him there. It was a kiss that said, "You are real. You are here. You are mine." He pushed her back against the couch cushions, his body half covering hers, his mouth leaving hers to trace a hot, urgent path down her jaw to the hollow of her throat. Aria's hands were trembling, her whole body shaking with the force of her want. He felt it. He stopped, his face buried in her hair, his breathing ragged. He pulled back, just enough to look at her. He saw her, truly saw her, the fear, the desire, the trembling. He rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closing. "You're safe with me," he whispered, the words a promise, a vow, a curse. Always, the peace, if it could be called that, lasted less than 12 hours. Aria awoke on her own lumpy couch, the ghost of Dante's desperate, protective kiss still burning on her lips. She had sent him home, a feat of willpower she did not know she possessed, her mind still reeling from his promise. "You're safe with me, always." But the fire on the news, the raw, split skin on his knuckles, the ice-cold fury that had led to it, all of it told a different story. She had not brought him safety. She had brought him chaos. She went to make coffee, her hands still trembling from the night before. As she unbolted the 3 locks on her door to retrieve the morning paper, she saw it. A small, white envelope, plain and cheap, had been slipped underneath. It was not addressed. Her heart seized. It was not from Dante. His messages were delivered by men, or by his own sudden, commanding presence. This was a violation with numb fingers. She opened it. Inside, a single piece of paper, the kind from a cheap notepad. On it, 4 words were written in neat, anonymous block letters. "You made him weak. That gets people killed." Aria's vision tunneled. The coffee cup slipped from her other hand, shattering on the linoleum. The hot liquid scalding her ankle. She did not feel it. She saw it all with a terrible, blinding clarity. The dance at the gala, the burned-out warehouse, the raw knuckles, the rooftop kiss in the rain, the desperate, hungry kiss on her couch. It was not protection, it was a liability. She was the crack in his armor, the one he had sworn he would never have. His sister. "I do not let civilians into my world." She had made him break his own rules, and now someone was dead, a warehouse was gone, and a war was starting. Because of her. Because he had been distracted, because he had been feeling instead of thinking. The note was not a threat, it was a fact. She had to go. It was not a choice. It was a necessity. She was a poison, and she was killing him, killing his control, dismantling the cold, careful fortress he had built around himself. She had to protect him, and the only way to protect him was to disappear. Protecting Matteo was harder. She could not take him. She could not tell him. She left a note on his pillow, a lie that tasted like ash. Got called in for a special event at a hotel upstate, a whole weekend. The pay is insane. Be good. Lock the door. Love you. She packed nothing, a change of clothes, the meager cash from her emergency tin, and a cheap prepaid burner phone she bought from a corner bodega. She left her real phone on the kitchen counter. She knew he would track it. She had to be smarter. She called in sick to Veritas, her voice a reedy, unconvincing croak. Her manager, likely terrified of being the one to question Marcelli's girl, just said, "Yes, Miss, of course. Miss, hope you feel better." She waited until the shift change for her guards, the moment of distraction when one car replaced the other. She slipped out the building's back entrance, through a neighbor's yard, and into the anonymous, churning sea of the subway. She rode it for an hour, transferring 3 times, before emerging in a part of the city she did not recognize, a place of auto body shops and peeling paint. She found it on the 3rd try, the Night Inn Motel, a faded neon sign, a lobby that smelled of stale cigarettes and bleach, a clerk who did not look up when she paid cash for one night. The room was a beige box of despair. A bed with a stained coverlet, a flickering television bolted to the wall, a single, grime-covered window overlooking a brick wall. She locked the deadbolt, pushed the flimsy chair under the doorknob, and collapsed onto the bed. She had done it. She was gone. She was safe. Which meant he was safe. She lay there, listening to the growl of trucks on the nearby highway, and for the first time since she had met Dante Marcelli, she allowed herself to cry. She cried for her own stupidity, for Matteo's loneliness, and for the man she had just tried to save by breaking his heart. Dante knew she was gone in less than an hour. He knew it with a cold, primal certainty that clawed its way up his throat. The guards reported she had not emerged. He called her phone. It rang, and rang, and rang, until it finally went to voicemail. He was at her apartment in 6 minutes. The shattered coffee cup, the cold, dark apartment, her phone on the counter. It was a staging. She had planned this. Rocco found the note for Matteo. Dante read it, the lie so painfully transparent it made his chest ache. "She called in sick," Rocco said, his voice grim. "Manager said she sounded bad." "She's not sick." Dante's voice was a low growl. "She's running." The rage was instant, a white-hot flash. She thought she could just leave. After everything? He would tear the city apart. He put every man he had on the street. He pulled every string. He got the security footage from her block, his jaw tight as he watched her slip through the alley, a ghost in a hoodie. He watched her go into the subway, and the trail went cold. She used cash, Rocco reported. Hours later, they were in Dante's office, the ashtray full, the city skyline mocking him. No credit cards, no ATM. She's smart. She's terrified, Dante corrected, the anger already fading, replaced by a hollow, sickening dread. What if Nico had found her? What if the note writer— "The note," he said, standing. "The one from last night, the one my men missed. Someone got to her door." He went to her apartment, his mind a steel trap. Running calculations. He found the envelope in the trash, the note itself crumpled into a tight ball in the corner of the kitchen. Near the broken cup. "You made him weak. That gets people killed." The breath left him in a single, painful gust. It was not a threat from Nico. It was a judgment, from his own side, or hers. Someone had done this to her. Someone had scared her into this. He looked at the empty apartment, at the spot on the couch where he had kissed her, at the phone she had left behind. He had her burner phone activated in 20 minutes. It was off. "She has to check on her brother," he said, the realization hitting him. "She's smart, but she's not a professional. She's not one of us. She won't be able to stay dark. Not with Matteo out there." He put a trace on the burner. He put a man in an unmarked car outside her apartment with one order. If Mateo leaves the building, if he even looks at a payphone, you call me. You do not approach him. You just listen. It took 24 hours. 24 hours of him staring at a silent phone, his entire operation on hold, the city on the brink of war, and the only thing that mattered was a single, missing waitress. At 8 o'clock the next night, his phone buzzed. "The kid's on the roof of his building," the man reported. "He's on his phone. He's crying." "Patch it through," Dante ordered. Aria's voice, small and thick with tears, filled his ear. "No, Maddie, I'm fine, I promise. The hotel is just... The reception is bad. I miss you. I'll be back soon, I promise." Dante closed his eyes. They had her. The burner pinged, his tech guy said a second later. "One tower, she's on the west side, near the highway, a 10-block radius." "Get me every motel registry in that radius for the last day," Dante ordered. "Cash payments, no ID." He found her in 45 minutes. The Night Inn Motel, room 114. He went alone. He told Rocco and his men to wait at the end of the block. He parked the car, walked up to the flimsy, peeling paint door, and knocked. Inside. Aria jumped so hard she hit the headboard. The knock. It was not loud, it was quiet. Certain it was his knock. She scrambled off the bed, her heart a trip hammer, her mind screaming, "No, no, no, how?" She backed against the far wall, her hand over her mouth. The knock came again. Patient. "Aria, open the door." His voice, low and muffled, cut through the wood and her legs gave out. She slid down the wall. "Go away," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Please, Dante, go away. I'm dangerous for you. You are going to open this door, or I am going to kick it in," he said, his voice flat, all patience gone. "And I would prefer not to explain that to the clerk." Slowly, her body moving on autopilot, she stood. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely undo the chain. She pulled the chair away, turned the deadbolt, and opened the door. He stood there, framed by the sickly yellow light of the motel walkway. He was not in his suit. He was in jeans and a dark Henley, a leather jacket. He looked wrecked. His face was pale, his jaw covered in a dark stubble, his eyes shadowed and exhausted. He was not the boss. He was the man. He was not angry. He looked hollow. He looked at her, at her tear-stained face, her rumpled clothes, at the cheap, sad room behind her. He looked at the crumpled note she was still clutching in her fist. Aria broke. A sob tore from her throat. "I'm sorry," she wept. "I was trying to... I'm a burden. I'm making you weak. The note. It was right. The fire. All those people. That's my fault. I'm sorry." Dante just stood there, taking in her words. Then slowly, he stepped inside and closed the door behind him. He sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress sinking under his weight. He did not yell. He did not loom. He just looked at her, his expression unreadable. "You leaving," he said, his voice rough. "Didn't keep me safe. Aria, it just broke me." She stared at him, her tears freezing. "What?" "For 24 hours, he said, his voice low. "I didn't know where you were. I didn't know if Nico had you. I didn't know if you were in a ditch. I had my entire organization, every man I trust, looking for one waitress." He looked up, his eyes meeting hers, and she saw the raw, terrifying vulnerability he had never shown. "Do you think that made me look strong? Do you think that kept me safe? My enemies could feel it. The city could feel it. Me, tearing my hair out, that was not strength, Aria. That was the only thing that has ever made me weak." He reached out and gently, so gently, took the crumpled note from her hand. He opened it, read the words, and his jaw tightened. "You were right to be scared," he said. "You were wrong to run. I didn't know what else to do. You come to me," he said, his voice hard. "You always come to me. You do not run. We do not run. We face it together." He stood. "Get your things." "I don't have anything." "Good." He held out his hand. "Let's go home." She put her hand in his. His grip was warm, firm, and he did not let her go all the way back to the car. He did not take her to her apartment. He took her to his, a penthouse that was less a home and more a fortress. All glass and steel and black leather, with the same staggering, godlike view as the rooftop. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handed one to her, and watched her as she drank. She was still trembling, the adrenaline and the fear slowly draining away, leaving her exhausted. "Go shower," he said, his voice gentle. "You're safe now." The hot water washed away the grime of the motel, but it could not wash away the feeling of his words. It just broke me. When she came out, wrapped in a thick, ridiculously soft robe, he was standing by the window. He had not moved. He turned, and the air crackled. The pretense was gone. The motel, the note, the hunt. It had burned away the last of their defenses. There was no more boss and waitress, no more protector and protected. There was just a man and a woman, raw and exposed. She walked to him, her feet silent on the cold marble. She stopped in front of him and, with a trembling hand, reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the dark stubble on his jaw. "You're real," she whispered. "I'm real," he rasped, his own hands coming up to grip her waist, his fingers digging into the robe. He pulled her against him, burying his face in her damp hair. "Don't you ever," he whispered, his voice thick, "ever do that to me again." "I won't," she promised. It started slow, a kiss that was a promise, a question, a relief. His mouth was gentle, his hands sliding up her back, holding her as if she were the only real thing in his world. She pulled back, just enough to unbutton the robe. It fell to the floor, leaving her standing before him. He just looked at her, his eyes dark with an emotion so profound it stole her breath. He lifted her, his arms strong, and carried her to his bed. The sheets were cool, the room dark, the only light the city glittering far below. "Arya," he whispered, his lips at her throat. She moved her hands from his shoulders, tracing the hard, defined lines of his chest. Her fingers found a scar, a thin, silvery line just below his collarbone. She traced it, then another, a puckered mark on his rib. She leaned down and pressed her lips to it. He hissed, his body tensing, but his hands in her hair were gentle. "I don't want to be feared with you," he whispered, his voice strained, his eyes squeezed shut. "Just felt." That was the moment the last of her fear gave way. She kissed every scar, every line, every mark of the life he had lived, a life of violence and shadow. She was not healing him. She was just seeing him. And when he finally moved over her, it was not the urgent, desperate kiss of her couch. It was slow, reverent. It was a joining. His hands, which had split other men's skin, were impossibly tender. His mouth a source of devastating, patient pleasure. He watched her, his dark eyes never leaving hers, and in them, she saw it all, the vulnerability, the power, the man he was, and the man he was only with her. And then the slowness broke, the tension snapping, the urgent, desperate need from the motel, from her couch, returned. It was a storm, a claiming, their bodies finally speaking the truths their mouths could not. It was a frantic, desperate collision, an affirmation that they were both still here, both still breathing. After, they lay tangled, their limbs intertwined, their breathing a shared rhythm in the quiet room. The city lights were their only witness. It was done. The line had been crossed, the final pretense burned away. He held her, one arm possessively draped over her waist, his chin resting on her head. "It's not just protection anymore," she murmured into the darkness. He tensed, and his grip tightened. "It never was." The next morning, she awoke to find him already dressed, standing by the window, a cup of coffee in his hand. The truce of the night was over. The day had arrived. He turned, his face serious, the boss back in place, but his eyes were different when they looked at her, softer. "We need to talk," he said. He handed her a fresh cup of coffee. "The note you got. You know who sent it." "I have a good idea. It wasn't from Nico. It was from someone on my side, or at least someone who pretends to be." He sat on the edge of the bed, his gaze hard. "I've suspected for months. We have a mole, someone in my inner circle. feeding information to Nico's family, the night of the poisoning. It was too clean. The fire. Nico knew which warehouse to hit back. Exactly the one that would hurt me the most. Not just my inventory. He has inside help. Aria's blood went cold. The note, Dante agreed, was meant to do exactly what it did. To break you, to make you run, to separate you from me. He met her eyes. They don't think you're a weakness, Aria. They think you're a threat. You're not a pawn. You're not leverage. You're my new variable. The one thing they can't predict. The one person who sees me, who I listen to. The mole wanted you gone. Aria stood. The robe clutched tight. Hiding had not worked. Running had not worked. The only way was through. There's another gala, she said, her voice quiet but firm. The Red Circle benefit. I read about it. Nico's family is always there. He's rumored to be crashing it, to make a statement. We are not going, Dante said, his voice final. It's too dangerous. I'm handling Nico. You're not handling him, Aria said, walking to him. You're at war with him, and your own family is betraying you. You can't see the board because I'm on it. She took his hand, the one with the scarred knuckles. Let me help. Let's go. Let's set a trap. Let me be the bait, the mole. Nico, they'll both be there. They'll both be watching me. No, Dante said. The word a gunshot. He stood, pulling his hand away. Absolutely not. My job is to protect you. I will not ever serve you up as bait. And my job isn't to be a waitress anymore, she shot back, her own anger rising. My job is to be this, whatever this is. You can't protect me by hiding me. Dante, you tried. It almost broke us. You want to find the mole? You want to end this with Nico? Then let him see me. Let him see me at your side. Let me help you. She stepped close, her eyes boring into his. You always protect everyone, she whispered, her voice fierce. You protect your family, your men, your territory. You protect me. Let me protect you for once. He stared at her, his jaw working, a war raging behind his eyes. The boss versus the man, the protector versus the partner. It's the only way, she said, not backing down. You know it is. The Red Circle benefit was not a gala. It was a performance of power. The grand ballroom of the Ethelred Hotel was a sea of old money and new, dangerous ambition. Crystal chandeliers, each one the size of a small car, cast a cold, brilliant light over the hundreds of guests. Aria felt the weight of their collective gaze, a physical pressure against her skin. She wore a dress of sleek, black silk that felt less like clothing and more like a second, more dangerous skin. It had a high neck and a low, open back, a contrast of modesty and vulnerability. Dante had chosen it. He had watched her put it on, his eyes dark and unreadable, and had personally clasped a simple, cold diamond necklace at her throat. His hand never left the small of her back. From the moment they stepped from the car, his touch was a constant, possessive heat against her skin. It was a brand, it was a warning. His men, led by Rocco, had entered first, spreading through the room, indistinguishable from the other dark-suited men, but for the predatory stillness in their eyes. Dante moved through the crowd with the slow, lethal grace of a shark, nodding to men who ran the city. His face a mask of bored civility, but his hand on her back, his fingers spread wide at the base of her spine, told the real story. He was a coiled spring. Aria was not the trembling waitress from Veritas. Not tonight. She had spent the last 3 days being trained, not by Dante, but by Rocco, in a quiet, chilling session. He had not taught her to shoot. He had taught her to see. He had taught her about choke points, exits, and the average reaction time of a man who thinks he is in charge. He had taught her, in his own gruff way, that her only job was to stay alive and create a window. The boss will find you? He had promised. Just give him 1 second. So she smiled. She held her head high. She sipped the champagne a waiter offered, though the bubbles tasted like ash. She was bait, but she was not. She swore to herself. A victim. They had been there for an hour. A long, agonizing hour of forced smiles and cold, assessing stares. When the air in the room shifted, It was the same void of silence that had announced Dante's arrival at Veritas, but this time it was laced with something else, something unclean. Nico Verratti arrived, as planned, fashionably and offensively late, and he was not subtle. He wore a suit of a blue so bright it was garish, his hair slicked back, a diamond pinky ring flashing under the lights. He moved with a swagger, his entourage of 4 brutish-looking men fanning out around him, his eyes, cold and blue, scanned the room, bypassing the mayor, the councilmen, and the other family heads, until they found her. He smiled, a wide, wolfish grin, and began to walk toward them. "He's coming," Arya murmured, her voice a low vibration. "I see him," Dante said, his voice equally low, his fingers on her back tensed. "Just for a second. Rocco is on his right, my other men are on the left. Let him come. Remember the plan." Dante did not step in front of her. Instead, he took a half step back, a deliberate, calculated move. He was releasing her, just slightly, letting her be the one Nico had to approach. He moved to a nearby pillar, pretending to get a fresh drink, his eyes never leaving her. Watching from a distance of no more than 10 feet, he was giving her the stage. Nico stopped in front of her, his men creating a small, intimidating pocket around them. "Arya," he said, his voice an oily purr. He said her name like he was tasting it. "You look spectacular. Black suits you. It's a color of mourning. Are you in mourning for your old life?" Arya gave him a smile that was all ice. "I am not in mourning, Mr. Verratti. I am just unimpressed. You are late." Nico's smile faltered, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. He had expected the terrified waitress. Not this. Sharp, too. I like that. A woman with fire. Dante doesn't know what to do with fire. He only knows how to put it out. He stepped closer, invading her space, his gaze dropping from her eyes to her necklace, then lower. "You know, he's just using you. A pretty little thing to distract his enemies. When he's done, he'll throw you away. He always does." "He seems very distracted by you right now," Arya said, her voice cool, as she glanced over Nico's shoulder. Nico, thrown off, looked back. Dante was not there. It was a feint. In the second Nico's head was turned, Dante had moved, not away, but closer, circling behind another group of guests. He was now at Nico's 4 o'clock, a clear line of sight. He was watching, waiting. Nico turned back, his face flushing with anger. He had been played subtly by a girl he thought was a toy. His mask of civility dropped. "You are making a mistake, little girl. You should have come with me when you had the chance." "I do not think so," Arya said. Nico's eyes hardened. He gave a small, sharp nod, a signal, over her shoulder. Tension, which had been a low hum, suddenly escalated, screaming to a breaking point. One of Nico's men, the one nearest the main doorway, reached under his jacket. Rocco, who had been pretending to talk to a city councilman, moved first. He was a blur, his big hand grabbing the man's wrist, the other hand delivering a short, brutal chop to his throat. That was the starting gun. A single, suppressed shot, a sound like a champagne cork, phut, and a glass in a woman's hand, 10 feet away. Exploded, chaos. The room erupted. It was not a shootout, it was a riot. The civilian guests, the ones who were not part of the game, screamed. They were a wave of panic, pushing, shoving, and trampling each other to get to the exits. Women in designer gowns fell, their heels catching, their screams high and thin. Tables were overturned, crystal shattering, champagne pooling on the marble floor like blood. Through the panic, Dante's men engaged. It was not a gunfight. It was a silent, professional war. Rocco had his man down. 2 of Nico's other men pulled their weapons, but they were met by Dante's, who materialized from the crowd, using the panicked civilians as cover. It was a flurry of dark suits and controlled violence, lost in the greater, louder chaos. Arya had been trained for this. The second the glass broke, she dropped, moving behind a thick, marble-topped buffet table. Just as Rocco had told her, she was covered, she was safe. But Nico had not forgotten her. In the confusion, he had not run for the exit, he had run for her. He vaulted the buffet table, his flashy blue suit a sudden terrifying splash of color in her vision. He grabbed her arm, his fingers biting into her skin, and yanked her to her feet. "You're coming with me," he snarled, his face no longer handsome but twisted with rage and desperation. He was not trying to fight, he was escaping, and he was taking his prize. He dragged her, her heels scraping on the marble, away from the ballroom, away from the fight, away from Dante. He shoved open a heavy wooden door and pulled her into a long, dimly lit service hallway. The door slammed shut behind them. The screams of the gala instantly muffled, replaced by the humming of an ice machine and their own ragged breathing. He threw her against the wall. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs, her head cracking against the plaster. He pinned her there, one forearm pressed hard against her collarbone, his other hand grabbing her jaw, forcing her to look at him. His blue eyes were wild, his chest heaving. "You think you're so smart," he panted, his face inches from hers. "You think you're his queen. You are nothing. You're a pet. He's using you to get to me, and now you are going to die for him." Arya stared into his eyes, her fear a cold, sharp blade, but Rocco's words were in her head. "Create a window." "He is not," Nico went on, his grip tightening, his knuckles white. "Going to throw it all away for a little stray bitch he found." He was trying to convince her, trying to break her. "He's just using you. I would have treasured you. I would have put you in diamonds. He put you in a coffin." He was monologuing. He was a man who believed his own voice, and in that, he was stupid. "You're wrong," Arya whispered, her voice trembling. "What?" He leaned in, a cruel smile playing on his lips, eager to hear her break. "You're wrong," she said, louder, and she kneed him, hard, with all the strength in her body, right between his legs. It was not a movie. He did not double over. He roared, a sound of pure, masculine agony, and his grip on her jaw loosened, his body instinctively jolting. It was the window. She did not stop. She was not a lady. She was a survivor. She bit down on the hand that was still on her shoulder, her teeth sinking into the fleshy part of his palm. He screamed, a high, thin sound, and jerked his hand back, the second his arm was off her throat. She did not run. She took a deep, ragged breath and she screamed. It was not a scream of fear. It was a scream of rage. It was a beacon. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated fury. Dante, the hallway door, the one he had dragged her through, exploded inward, splintering off its hinges. Dante stood there, framed in the doorway, the chaotic light of the ballroom behind him. He was a silhouette of pure, murderous rage. His suit was torn, his hair unbound, and in his hand a black pistol, held with a steadiness that was terrifying. His eyes were not human. They were the eyes of a demon, fixed on the man who was touching his woman. Nico panicked. He lunged for Arya, grabbing her from behind, pulling her back against his chest, his arm locking around her throat. He had a gun, a small silver pistol, and he pressed the muzzle of it hard against her temple. "Stop!" He shrieked, his voice cracking. "One more step, Marcelli, and I'll blow her pretty, stupid head all over this hallway. I swear to God." Dante stopped. He was 20 feet away. He did not lower his gun. He did not raise it. He just waited. His breathing was hard, his chest rising and falling, but his gun hand was rock solid. "You lost, Nico," Dante said, his voice a low, gravelly sound that seemed to shake the very walls. "Let her go. I'll let you walk. My word." "Your word?" Nico laughed, the sound hysterical. "Your word is shit. You're just like me. She's a thing, and now she's my thing. My ticket out of here." He was holding her too tight, his arm cutting off her air, the gun barrel digging a painful, cold circle into her skin. She could feel the wild, erratic thumping of his heart against her back. Arya looked at Dante. He was not looking at Nico. He was looking at her. His dark eyes were locked on hers, and in them, she saw no fear. She saw no panic. She saw a command. Now, he trusted her. He was waiting for her. Rocco's voice. Create a window. She was his partner. She put all her thought, all her strength, all her rage into one tiny movement. She could not breathe. She could not move, but she could think. Nico's arm was a rigid bar across her throat. His head was just above hers. his chin resting on the top of her head as he yelled at Dante. Arya snapped her head back as hard as she could, using the base of her skull as a weapon, aiming for his nose. It was not enough, but it made him grunt, his head gyrating back in surprise, and in that same split second, she did not try to pull his arm away. She went with the pressure. She elbowed, not out, but up. She drove her elbow up and back with every ounce of her remaining strength, slamming it not into his stomach, but up, under his chin, into his throat. It was a perfect, devastating strike. Nico made a sound, a wet, choking gasp, his entire body convulsed. His arm, the one holding her, went slack. His head, the one with the gun, flew back. For 1 second, one perfect, beautiful, terrifying second, his throat was exposed. Arya did not see the flash. She only heard the shot, deafeningly loud in the narrow hallway. It was a single, clean, final punctuation mark. Nico's grip on her disappeared. His body did not fall. It just collapsed. He went limp, a dead weight, and slid down the wall, leaving a dark, wet smear. His eyes open and surprised. The silver gun clattered to the floor. The silence was a ringing, metallic thing. Arya stood there, shaking, her knees buckling, gasping for air, her throat raw. Dante did not move for a second. His gun was still raised. Then, as if a string had been cut, the pistol lowered, the demon in his eyes receded, and the man came rushing back. He shoved the gun into the back of his pants and was at her side, his body covering her, his hands all over her, checking, searching, turning her face to the light. "Are you hit, Arya? Are you hit? Look at me. Talk to me. I'm okay," she choked out, and the shaking, the true, bone-deep, delayed shock, hit her. Her legs gave out. He caught her, pulling her into him, his arms wrapping around her like steel bands, crushing her against his chest. He held her so tightly she could not breathe, his face buried in her hair. "You're okay," he whispered, his voice rough, chanting it like a prayer. "You're okay." She clung to him, her fingers digging into the torn fabric of his jacket, her face pressed against his chest. She was sobbing, great, gasping, ugly sobs of terror and relief. He just held her, stroking her hair, his hand shaking. He pulled her back, just enough to look at her. His face was pale, his eyes still dark with the remnants of the murder he had just committed for her. He cupped her face, his thumbs wiping at her tears. "You're mine," he whispered, his voice a raw, broken thing. "You hear me? You're mine. You'll always be mine." He kissed her. Then, not a kiss of passion, but a kiss of ownership. It was hard, and it was desperate, and it tasted of gunpowder and fear. It was a brand, sealing her to him. Sirens wailed in the distance. Rocco appeared at the end of the hall, his face grim. "Boss, it's done, but we have to go. The police, they're not on our payroll tonight. This is not our district." Dante did not let her go. He just scooped her into his arms, as if she weighed nothing, and carried her out, back through the ruined ballroom, past the overturned tables and the shattered glass. A king carrying his queen from the battlefield. The police were paid off, eventually. The incident was spun, a tragic, isolated case of gang rivalry, Verratti and Marcelli, a war that had finally, publicly, boiled over. The high society guests who had been there were delicately reminded that what they had seen was nothing more than a private dispute. But the real story, the one that filtered through the underworld, was not about the gangs. It was about the girl. The story was this. Nico Verratti had made the mistake of touching Dante Marcelli's woman, and she, in turn, had helped him pull the trigger. Aria Flores, the waitress, the ghost, was not a nobody anymore. She was not a pet. She was not a weakness. She was a threat. She was a survivor. She was his. The dust of the Ethelred Gala settled, but it did not disappear. It coated their new life in a fine, shimmering layer. The weeks that followed were a blur of adjustment. Aria moved her few belongings from the small, cramped apartment into the sprawling, glass-walled fortress of Dante's penthouse. It was a move not of convenience, but of necessity. The underworld now knew her face. She was marked. She had not, however, given up her life. It was a point of contention, the first real argument they had as a couple. "You will not work," Dante had stated, not unkindly, as he watched her pull on her black work uniform. It was 2 weeks after the shooting. "I am," she replied, her voice firm as she tied her apron. "It is not a request." He had stood, his 6-foot frame radiating controlled frustration. "Aria, you were almost killed. You are the partner of a mafia boss, not a cocktail waitress." "I am both," she had said, turning to face him. She was not the same woman he had met. The fear was gone, replaced by a cool, hard-won resolve. "You cannot hide me. Dante, we tried that. It did not work. They need to see me. They need to see that I am not a prisoner. I am not some glass doll you keep on a shelf. I am the woman who is with you, and she still works." He had stared at her, a muscle in his jaw working, and she saw the moment his frustration gave way to that same grudging respect. He knew she was right. Hiding her would look like weakness. Her continued presence, in the very club where this all began, was a statement of power. "Fine," he finally ground out, "but you are not taking the bus." So she kept working. But now, she was driven to Veritas in an armored town car. 2 of Dante's most trusted men, not the club bouncers, were her permanent shadows. One at the service entrance, one in the main room, their eyes never leaving her. The whispers at work, which had once been fearful, were now laced with something bordering on awe. She was a legend, the waitress who had brought Nico Verratti down. The greatest change was not the penthouse or the guards. It was Matteo. Dante, in his typical, brutally efficient fashion, had not just paid for Matteo's care, he had acquired it. He had flown in a specialist from Switzerland, a man who was a pioneer in experimental lung treatments. Matteo was moved to a private wing of a hospital Dante's family had funded for generations. 3 weeks after the gala, Aria walked into that hospital room to find Matteo sitting up, not on his usual cot, but on a top-of-the-line gaming chair, yelling at a 70-inch screen. His color was back. He was breathing, truly breathing, without the faint, wheezing whistle that had been the soundtrack to her entire life. Dante was standing in the corner, his arms crossed, a rare, faint smile on his lips as he watched the boy play. "Aria!" Matteo yelled. Pausing the game, he jumped up, and for the first time in his life, he did not cough. He ran to her, sweeping her up in a hug that was suddenly strong. "Did you see that? I totally beat the final boss." "I see that," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears as she held her brother, her heart so full she thought it might burst. She looked over his shoulder at Dante. He just nodded. Once, as if to say, "This is what we do. We fix what is broken." Matteo's adoration for Dante was immediate, nigh total. He was not intimidated by the stories. He was captivated by the power. He thought Dante was the coolest man on earth. "So, did you really set that warehouse on fire?" he asked Dante one afternoon, his eyes wide, as Aria brought them both sandwiches. "Matteo," Aria scolded. Dante just took a bite of his sandwich. "It was structurally unsound," he said, his face perfectly straight. Matteo dissolved into laughter. "Dude, you are way too scary to be my sister's boyfriend. It's awesome." But not everyone was as charmed as Matteo. The Marcelli family, the old guard, the capos who had served Dante's father. They were a different story. They saw her not as a partner, but as a problem. She was a civilian. She was not Italian. She was, in their eyes, a mongrel who had bewitched their boss, a distraction who had drawn them into a bloody, public war with the Verratti family. Dante had wiped out Nico, but the family remained, and they were furious. The mole, it turned out, had been one of his own cousins, a man now sleeping permanently in the foundation of a new construction project. The war had been contained, but the resentment simmered. They faced it as they faced everything now, together. Dante brought her to the Sunday family dinner. It was a command performance, held at his father's old, cavernous estate. The air in the dining room was thick with tension, the long, polished table filled with hard-eyed men and their silent, watchful wives. Aria sat at Dante's right hand, her back straight, her expression a perfect, neutral mask, the 5th course, A heavy pasta was being served when a capo named Old Man Petri, a grizzled, sour man who had been complaining about Dante's new methods for years, spoke. "It is a shame," he said, his voice loud in the quiet room. "A man works his whole life to build an empire. He spills blood for it, and then he hands it to a son who would rather trade it all for a piece of outside tail." The clinking of silverware stopped. Every eye in the room went to Arya, then to Dante. Arya's knuckles went white on her napkin. She did not look at Petri. She looked at her plate. Dante did not move. He did not look at Petri. He continued to slowly, deliberately, twirl pasta onto his fork. He took a bite, chewed, and swallowed. He wiped his mouth with his napkin. Then, in the dead, suffocating silence, he spoke. His voice was not loud. It was a quiet, conversational, and utterly deadly calm. Petri, the old man, who had been looking smug, flinched. Dante's eyes, black as a winter night, lifted and pinned the capo to his chair. "This woman," Dante said, his voice a silken, dangerous thread, "has shown more courage than your entire table combined. She has faced down our enemies. She has bled for this family. She's more Marcelli than you will ever be." He leaned forward, just an inch. "She is my guest. She is my partner, and she is the future of this family. Insult her again, and you will not speak another word in this family. You will not speak another word at all." The silence that followed was not tension. It was the silence of a grave. Petri's face went the color of ash. He could not speak. He just nodded, a small, jerky, terrified movement. Dante leaned back, picked up his wine glass, and took a sip. "The pasta is excellent, uncle," he said to the man at the head of the table. The conversation, strained and false, slowly resumed that night, back in the silence of their penthouse. Arya stood at the window, watching the city lights. Dante came up behind her, his arms sliding around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "He will never speak to me again," she said. "No," Dante agreed, his voice a low rumble against her back. "He will not." She turned in his arms to face him. "Did you ever regret it?" "Regret what? Ending Petri?" "No," she smiled, a small, sad smile. "Making it public, that night at the first gala, the dance. You claimed me. You set all of this in motion. If you had just let me be. Let me stay invisible." He cupped her face, his hands warm and calloused, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. His eyes, so often cold and guarded, were open to her, soft and intense. "Not once," he whispered. "I have never regretted it, for a single second. That dance, it told them all, but it also told me. When I held you, I knew. I was not claiming you for them. I was claiming you for me." He kissed her. Then. And the nature of their passion had changed. The desperate, frantic hunger of their first nights, the collision of fear and need had settled. It had deepened, matured into something more profound. He made love to her slowly, reverently. He took his time, as if he had all the time in the world, as if every second mattered. He, who had been so fierce and controlled, was now soft, not weak, but tender. His hands, which had taken lives, now moved over her skin with an artisan's care, memorizing her, worshipping her, but the fierceness was still there. It was in his eyes, in the possessive way he held her, in the depth of his kiss. It was the fierceness of a man who had found the one thing in his dark world that was pure, and he would die before he let it go. Life found a new rhythm. The thread of the Verratti family had not disappeared. It had just changed shape. Nico was gone, but his cousin, a man named Leo, had arrived in town from Sicily. He was not like Nico. He was not flashy, not impulsive. He was quiet. He was old world. He was, as Rocco had reported with a grim expression, a true believer. He was here for vendetta, a final, looming threat. But Arya was no longer afraid. The girl who had flinched at a raised voice was gone. The woman who remained stood by Dante's side, not behind him. The final scene of their old life and the first of their new one came at a charity gala for the city's new children's hospital, the one Matteo had been in. Dante had funded the entire pulmonary wing. It was a different kind of crowd. Not all mafia. It was the city's elite, bankers, politicians, old money families, but the undercurrent was the same. Power recognized power. Arya stood beside him, this time in a dress of deep, defiant red. She was not his guest. She was his co-host. Her name was on the invitation next to his. She looked out at the room, at the hundreds of faces, the flashing cameras, the polite smiles that hid sharp teeth. She felt the familiar weight of their stares, the whispers, the assessments. She leaned into Dante, her lips brushing his ear. "Everyone's watching again," she whispered. He smirked, that rare, breathtaking smile that was only for her. His hand found its familiar place at the small of her back, pulling her close, flush against his side. He leaned down, his lips brushing her temple, the scent of him, the pure, male confidence, a familiar comfort. "Let them," he said, his voice a low, possessive growl that was only for her. "I already danced with the only woman I'll ever love." Thank you so much for listening to our story. It's been a wild ride, and we're so glad you were here for it. We would love to know where you are listening from, so please drop a comment and let us know. If you enjoyed this, please be sure to subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories for more, and let us know what you thought of Arya and Dante's journey in English. Your thoughts and feedback mean the world to us. Until next time.